Don't be feeling blue, no, no. Shine your light all around, like I know you can do, baby. Yeah, I know you can do. Now some people call me. Welcome, my friends, to the Sage Aquay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Today, my guest is colleague Caroline Lehan. Caroline is a master hypnotherapist and holistic practitioner. She is the proprietor of Healing Tides Hypnotherapy, which is located in the Los Angeles, California area. The conversation with Caroline was wide-ranging as we discussed the benefits of hypnosis, including our ability to explore and heal through spiritual journeys. And so without further ado, here's the discussion with Caroline. Well, friends, we have a great show today. My colleague Caroline Lehan is with me, and we're going to talk about her hypnotherapy practice, which is in the Los Angeles, California area. And so, Caroline, with this being your first time as a guest on the show, I was wondering if you could take our listeners through your journey.
I like to preface by saying that back in the day, I didn't really understand that I was quote-unquote sensitive or empathic, but now I understand looking back that that's how I was feeling. So throughout my life, I had always been like that. I had always been kind of drawn to, oh my gosh, something's wrong. I need to heal this. I need to fix this. Why am I so emotional? But I never really understood it. So I decided I was passionate about wildlife and conservation. And so I actually got my degree in wildlife biology. But during that time in college, it was just very clear to me that something wasn't right. It was almost like there was like a deadness in my heart. And it sounded so awful to me because wildlife biology, I thought, was alternative. So I thought, this is something I'm passionate about. This must be my passion. And I just kept following it. And it was like every single sign was a dead end. I remember even volunteering for a professor at UC Berkeley. And he even told me straight up, he said, I don't know if you want to go into this field. That just broke my heart. The biggest thing was that it was just so much fear because I didn't really know who I was and I wasn't really sure where I was going because I had really latched on to that idea that I'd be a wildlife biologist. And so it was very hard for me to finally make a decision that something wasn't right. And then during that time, it was just kind of a challenging time in my life where a long-term relationship had ended and I just didn't feel good about myself. And basically everything kind of came to a head and I crashed and burned and fell into a depression. And so during that time, I basically, because I had put all my eggs in one basket for believing that I'd be this wildlife biologist and that would make me happy, it gave me an opportunity to have a clean slate. So it was like I was so unhappy that it was finally the first time in my life that I could just stop. So in that time that I stopped, I started listening to what I call my inner voice because I had no other choice. So I was like, well, I might as well just listen to myself or do what makes me feel good. And that was going for walks and reading books and listening to music and doing all these things that I had never really given myself an opportunity to do. So in a very short amount of time, that inner voice got louder and louder and louder. And it started guiding me to certain books. And there were also a few synchronicities, like I was living with my dad at the time, and he had just brought up the term law of attraction. I had no idea what that was, and I looked into it, and I thought it was really exciting. So fast forward to where I found hypnotherapy is I was reading about spirituality and I was reading about healing and I was reading about healing myself and learning how to heal myself. And I think it was the Michael Newton books that I found. And there's one called Memories of the Afterlife. And something about that book just spoke to me. And so I decided, okay, well, if I'm actually going to go into that, then I should probably try a session. So I tried some hypnotherapy myself and I just felt like this is absolutely what I'm meant to do. And it was almost like that deadness in my heart had turned the other way, where it was like there was this fire burning. And I didn't really understand it, but it was just saying, go, go, go. So I kept following that. And now I see it as I was actually just listening to my inner voice. So I just kept following that passion. And it led me all the way to Los Angeles to start my own practice. And I actually came here, again, very open, unsure, just trying to get my certification. And before I knew it, once I got my first paying client after that, it was a full-blown practice, and it's never stopped. Then that inner voice again started to come up in my hypnotherapy and started to teach me how I operate and how I can really connect with people and work with people. And so since then, I've also still been very passionate about learning about different healing modalities. I got certified in emotional freedom technique, and I've, dabbled in some other types of modalities as well. But really for me, it's just, I'm very passionate about it. I'm very passionate about hypnotherapy, but mostly I'm passionate about the healing work. I'm passionate about connecting with people and helping them connect with themselves.
It's a great story because, and it resonates with a lot of folks, Caroline, as you know, that get into this field. And what I mean by that is the inner voice that you mentioned. It's the same thing that happened to me. There was this inner voice. I was doing something completely different than what I'm doing today. In fact, I was in the corporate world, and I was in the corporate world for over 30 years. And so I had the same thing. It was this calling. And it's funny you should mention the Michael Newton book and Memories of the Afterlife, because that is the very same book that I was drawn to. In fact, I read all of Michael Newton's books in reverse. I read his last book first, and then I backtracked to Journey of Souls, which is his first book. That journey, or that path that you just took us through, is very common for folks that have gone into alternative wellness or healing types of careers. Let me ask you this. How important is it, from your perspective, that when you're doing this type of work, whether it be hypnotherapy or EFT or anything else, how important is your own state of mind and your own health from an inner perspective? How important is that?
I would say it's all of it. I would say it's almost the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
That being said, that doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to be going through a healing process while I'm still working with people, because I believe it's silly to think that any one person has no healing to be done. However, it's unbelievable how when I have looked into something or I have really gotten passionate or excited about something, that client will show up. Always. That's how it always is.
Yeah.
And so I believe it's not even a matter of necessarily that person needs me so much, but that there's this bigger picture going on. There's this connection where it's time. It's like, okay, now this I can help this person, and this person is ready to receive what I can offer them to help themselves. It almost feels like it's this dance where, and I don't know if you feel this way in your practice, but for the most part, I feel that the majority of my clients, I just resonate with them. I just feel the connection instantly, and it just feels very easy and flowy. And I'm very passionate about where they're going and what they're doing. And, I often learn from them. So I feel that really it's almost just two friends, two souls who are saying, hey man, I picked up all this junk. Can you help me clear it?
Yeah.
It's my passion.
Yeah. It's a process of discovery and exploration, right? We have to constantly explore. Otherwise, you and I talked about this before we got started with the show. If we don't go through this process of discovering and learning and exploration, then you become very static. And that's really not where you want to be. Humans should be thriving. Yes, it can be very challenging because of the environment that we have to operate in to have that constant thriving or optimistic way of life. But it's very important to establish a discipline, at least, from my view, to have that discipline to maintain that optimism. Otherwise, things could get derailed, or you could fall into a funk, or you could get depressed, and so on.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that we're coming to a time period where we're starting to learn that we're not the same people every day, that we wake up changed, and that we go through changes, and that we expand, and that we can't assume that who I was last year is who I'm going to be next year, because that's not expansion. Changing and growing and expanding is our nature. That's our birthright. And it's really just a matter of, are we giving ourselves permission? And oftentimes what keeps us stuck is that we're afraid. We can't give ourselves permission because we've defined ourselves so heavily. And that's what I did with wildlife biology. I was so stuck on the idea. And of course, I'm lucky. I mean, many people go, they have a lot worse situation than realizing they're not passionate about what they thought. But in that situation, I resisted for a very long time until I was so unhappy that I gave up.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah, and it was because I was so afraid of the possibility that my definition of myself could be different. What would I be if I didn't have this idea that I was a wildlife biologist? Who was I? Well, that's what I needed to find out.
Yeah, it's interesting how we have these parameters in which we operate in, and many of these parameters are not real; they're fiction. So we box ourselves in.
Yep.
And we have a certain identity to certain expectations, whether it be our own expectations or expectations from others toward us, or a combination of both. And so you think to yourself sometimes, well, I don't want to disappoint myself or my family or whatever. And you're thinking, yeah, this will work. This can work. And then, as you mentioned before, there's this force inside of you that's saying, no, that's not going to work. Right?
Yeah.
You need to go do something else. And then your question is, well, what else is there? What else should I be doing? I don't even know where to start because this is the only thing that I have been focused on. In your case, it was wildlife biology. In my case, it was working in the corporate world. But the truth of the matter is, when you relax and you just let things flow, your inner self, that higher self, comes through and starts to help you to steer the ship. That's what I have found.
Absolutely.
Now, Caroline, when clients ask you to explain what hypnosis is and what hypnosis is not, how do you explain that to them? Because I'm sure there's a lot of folks listening to this right now that have never been to hypnosis, so maybe you can give them some insight.
Sure. I usually give them two descriptions. I say, okay, the first description I'm going to give you is the more rational, scientific understanding. And so that one is that you have your conscious mind and your unconscious mind, or your subconscious mind. And I like to use the analogy of a desktop computer and a hard drive. So your subconscious mind being the hard drive, your conscious mind being the desktop. And basically, it's about that 10% is your conscious mind and the rest is the subconscious. So if you want to make any real change, you can mess around with the desktop all you want, the conscious mind, but nothing's actually going to change the programming unless you go into that subconscious or hard drive. So essentially, hypnotherapy is a tool or technique to bring that person into a relaxed state where we can access that part of them, where they are open and willing to access that part of them, so we can do healing on a deeper level. So we have access to all sorts of their psyche and their emotions, so we can really get to the root. It's almost like if you want to release a weed, you have to actually pull it out other than just kind of poke at the top and that's why willpower alone can be so challenging for people, because they're going against that 80 to 90% that has a different program running.
Right.
And I also find that there's a synchronicity to that because there's a reason why we're meant to look within. We're not supposed to just use the conscious mind to heal, because what would be the point? We're supposed to look in so we ourselves can say, okay, this is what I have. This is where I picked it up. This is why I can release it. And so there's so much more we could talk about with that, like understanding trauma and how the brain flags it. But the second definition that I give people is hypnotherapy is also just a permission slip to connect deeper within, to access the inner self, and to allow that person to dive deeper into a part of themselves that they don't normally have access to. I apply my work more to the second definition because I find it's really just a matter of simplifying it. You help the person connect, and once you're in there, we do the healing work. And the reason why I prefer the second definition is because I have found I may have an idea or a plan or an inkling of what that person needs. But when we're in that realm, they know, and they will tell you what they need. Their guidance will tell you. So that to me is so powerful, is being able to access that part of them that is able to say, oh no, this is what I need. And usually it's not completely surprising. The person has some sort of feeling that, okay, I've felt this all my life, or yeah, I feel this in every relationship, or I've always had that nagging feeling and now I know why.
Yeah, the permission slip analogy is great because you're absolutely right. What happens is people just define their consciousness. It's the outward aspects of their existence. It's the physical world. It's the interaction they have every day. It's their job and stuff like that. And what they don't spend a lot of time doing, and it's not their fault because the society and the culture that we live in does not teach that there are other aspects or that the consciousness goes way beyond just the waking state. So the ability to be able to resolve conflict is significantly enhanced, like you said, Caroline, when you're able to go deep within yourself. Because within yourself, what happens is you're bypassing all of that conscious mind gatekeeping, all of the rationalizations and so on. And you're getting to the point where your inner self is speaking now. Your inner self can say, hey, you know what? This is what I need to do. Or this is where I have to go. Or this is what I have to look at. Or this is what I have to stop doing. And that insight resides within all of us. If you tap into it, and that's really what you do and that's what I do, we facilitate their ability to tap into that. We're not creating that for them. We're just getting them to the point where, like you said, they give themselves that permission slip. And then they're able to get that wisdom and that insight from deep within them. It's great to talk to a colleague that approaches it in a very similar fashion. So let's use an example here. Let's say somebody comes in and they say to you, or they give you a call on the phone, Caroline, and they say that they have issues with self-confidence. So how would you work a session with somebody that comes in with that type of issue, lack of confidence?
The first session, I always allow it to be a little bit more general so I can actually get a feel for what's going on and that person can, because as you know, sometimes the conscious mind has an understanding of what's actually going on, but when you get into that deep space, there's a lot more or a lot less that's going on. So the first session is really kind of a let's see what's up. And the technique that I use is I bring that person into that connected state using what's called in hypnotherapy an induction, progressive relaxation. And once they're in that state, I'll start by working with the body. So I start by asking them, okay, self-confidence. Tell me a little bit how that feels. Oh, it feels stuck. It feels like a pressure. Okay, where do you feel the pressure? It's in my chest. Oh, what does that look like to you? It's like a weight. Oh, okay. No, it's like the anchor of a ship. Oh, okay. And all of a sudden, we're starting to move. And then it depends on what I'm getting from that person, but sometimes we'll go into the past. So, for example, that self-confidence, okay, when was the first time, right? In hypnotherapy, we call it the initial sensitizing event. When was the first time that you picked that up? When was the first time? And they'll go back and say, oh, my father always worked late, and every time I wanted to play with him, he was too tired and he told me to go to sleep, and I started to think that I wasn't good enough and then I started to apply that same understanding to all my relationships. And then, that filter will be interpreted in all other areas of life. So if a boss says something negative, that person can't look at it neutrally and say, okay, my boss is clearly having a bad day, but instead uses it through the filter of low self-confidence as there's something wrong with me. Again, my boss is telling me that. Or we could go into other aspects. Like I said, sometimes the inner voice itself will just come in and it will start saying, okay, this is what needs to happen. This is what I need to release. This is why this is coming up. Or sometimes we'll connect with future scenarios with what that confidence looks like so that person can see how they're holding themselves back or why they don't need to feel that anymore.
So there's a process that you go through where the client becomes aware of the issue. In other words, when that issue first wrote its files to the hard drive that you spoke about earlier, right? That would be the initial sensitizing event. So going back to when that particular client was a child and the father was working late, and then when the father came home and the child wanted to play, but the father was too tired, he said, no, just go to sleep. And then the child had that lack of confidence. It was maybe even a lack of self-worth. Well, why doesn't my dad want to play with me, right?
Right.
At that moment, what happens is the files that we mentioned before, they're getting written to the inner mind or the subconscious mind's hard drive. Going forward in life, if I'm following your process here, anytime the client encounters or interacts in a situation where confidence may be required, those files on the hard drive are keeping it back. It's not allowing the client to experience being confident in doing something, because the files that are there are saying, look, you don't have the confidence to be able to do this or to be able to speak in that meeting, pick a situation. And it's interesting to me how just that one initial sensitizing event, it's the first time that those files got written to the hard drive, can have an impact on somebody's life from that point forward. From that point going forward can mean what? Decades.
Mm-hmm.
Decades of that behavior. Am I right?
Oh, yeah. Whole lifetimes.
And as you continue to experience and engage that behavior, that becomes a habituated pattern of behavior, which means you are reinforcing that lack of confidence or that lack of self-worth. Each time you don't break out of it, and each time you repeat the pattern, you're making that part of you larger and stronger. And that's why hypnosis, like you said, is very beneficial, because at the conscious mind level, with all of its gatekeeping type of function, is really not going to allow you to go that deep to explore why you have a lack of self-confidence. It's just going to maintain the veneer that says you just can't do it, so don't bother. Whereas with hypnotherapy, you can get in, under the hood, and you can start tweaking and changing that pattern of behavior, and the client could very well, and many times does, experience a whole different way of interaction, a whole different way of behavior. Now, what I tell folks, Caroline, is that hypnosis has science behind it. There's no question about it. But to be a really effective hypnotherapist, it's more than just knowing the quote-unquote science. It's really an art, isn't it? I mean, isn't it about having the experience and the skill under your belt to be able to navigate and to be able to quickly understand how to resolve a particular client's conflict? In other words, thinking on your feet, very quickly being able to think on your feet. Because I could see where if you don't have those types of attributes as a practitioner, you might get jammed up in some sessions if you don't know where to go.
Yes, I completely agree with you. In fact, that's what I feel has allowed my sessions to be so effective and has allowed my practice to be so strong, is that at some point I finally had to say, I just got to do this my way. I just got to listen and learn and flow with it. And I've allowed kind of new information to come in and new ways of approaching it that I can't reference in a book or, a teaching or a course. And I think that's the point, is that I'm meant to have my own style, and the clients who come to me are drawn to that. So yes, I believe it's the absolute most important thing, because you're not just using techniques, you're tapping into the energy, the frequency of the session. You are, like you said, it's an art. You are literally like an instrument. You are providing the right platform, the right environment for that person to heal. And you have to be able to go backwards and forwards and sideways and wherever they need to go.
Now, you and I, before we got started with the show, we talked a little bit about clinical hypnosis versus spiritual hypnosis. And then for me, in between clinical and spiritual hypnosis is what is referred to as transpersonal hypnosis. That's how I kind of define it. It's kind of the bridge between clinical and spiritual. And you had said to me, Mike, you don't really practice clinical hypnosis, I guess, in the from an absolute perspective. In other words, it sounded to me like you really go into the transpersonal to start, and then maybe perhaps it even goes beyond that, past the transpersonal and more into spiritual types of hypnosis. So now the clinical type of hypnosis, Caroline, just to help the audience here, they might be familiar with from watching TV and movies where there's spirals and the watch going back and forth and stuff like that. But that's not how it works, right? I mean, that's not how you do it. It's not how I do it. So when you talked about a progressive relaxation as an induction, what exactly does that mean? What is a progressive relaxation induction?
Well, it's as simple as instead of using more of an authoritative approach, trying to use kind of like trigger words for the the subconscious mind to take orders, progressive relaxation is simply relaxing the conscious mind and allowing that subconscious to rise to the surface like a cork. So it's basically allowing the conscious mind to say, oh, I'm very tired, I'm very sleepy, I'm just going to go over here and relax. And then before you know it, the gatekeeper has opened the gate and you are in. So essentially, it's really just you're allowing that person to relax into this very natural state of hypnosis.
Okay, and I want to make sure I get this right. So is a good analogy for progressive relaxation as far as getting the client into hypnosis, is it similar to guided imagery as an example?
Right. And I'm sure there's nothing wrong with those other ways. I'm sure some people are drawn to that. But for me, that's just not my style. So I find that I'm very good at the progressive relaxation and getting people to let go. You know, I get a lot of people who say, I have a hard time letting go. And I feel that that's why they're drawn to the work. I think that there's more than just kind of the words that I'm using. I think it's really the whole approach. It's the energy of it. It's the intention that I have behind it. It's simply just using guided imagery and saying certain phrases and bringing that person into a more relaxed state so that they can let go. Because essentially, you can hypnotize someone, but they're hypnotizing themselves. I can say whatever I want, but that person is the one going into that state. So it's kind of like, what do they need for permission? And I find that the more I've been doing this work, the easier it is to get them into that state. I mean, sometimes it's just almost automatic. And that's where, you know, again, I believe that there's more to hypnotherapy than we understand. That hypnotherapy is a very natural state that we are just now starting to recognize more, and we call it hypnotherapy, but I feel that it's almost a part of our true nature that we're just really on the surface of understanding.
Yeah, and we go in and out of trance all day long.
Right.
And that's the other thing. Hypnosis or trance is a natural state of consciousness. People are taught that the only two states that really exist are your waking state
Yeah.
and when you're asleep. But the truth of the matter is that there are states in between your conscious waking state and when you're asleep. And in fact, when you're in your conscious waking state, you're going to go in and out of trance all day long. And so, you know, what do we mean by that? Well, if you daydream, that's a trance state. If you're driving on the highway and you're on autopilot because you're thinking about work or something at home and you don't remember driving past the last exit or two, that's what we refer to as highway hypnosis. So we go in and out. One of the examples I use, Caroline, is with my clients is you go to a movie theater, it's a very popular movie, and the movie theater seats 500 people. And so when you first get there, you realize that there are 499 other people with you in the movie theater. But once the movie starts, you are engaged with what's happening on the screen, and it's just now between you and what's playing on the screen. The other 499 people really don't exist anymore. They're not within your consciousness. That focus and that concentration is a trance state. And that's what we try to do when we get a client to come in, is to get them into that type of trance state where all the other stuff that's going on around them gets excluded so that we can focus on the subject at hand or whatever the issue is that they would like to work on. Now, I wanted to ask you this question. You mentioned this a little early about the first session is getting the client acclimated to the hypnosis process. Now, some listening to our show here might think, well, aren't my issues going to get resolved in one session? Sounds like Caroline and Mike are talking about there's multiple sessions. So when a client calls you and asks you how many sessions, is it going to take one? How do you respond to that?
Great question. It's important to understand that it's a process because you don't want to be ice skating around. It's like if you just go to one session, it's like, okay, doors open, you're aware of your stuff. And now you're just kind of like, you know, going around trying to figure out, okay, how do I fix these pieces? The reason why the progression is so important is because this is a physical reality. Healing really takes place when you apply it. So when you have that change in the first session, the last question I ask, and don't get me wrong, they're going to experience amazing change from one session. The last question that I ask is, so how can you anchor this in more, or how can you take this even further for yourself in this next week? And they'll get an intuitive answer, and it might be meditate or go for a walk or really start to approach, what it would feel like to let myself be confident. And then that next week they come in truly a different person. And then we're ready to work on the next thing. And so it's almost like those stepping stones are for their advantage because they truly get to know it in their bones. Because you could read all the books you want. You could understand everything you want from one session. But if you're not actively allowing yourself to step into that next you, it's not going to be very effective because you're the one who's deciding to allow that change. And so really it's a matter of allowing yourself to change, because it's not so much a matter of being afraid of our darkness. What I've found that when you really boil it down, it's afraid of our lightness. It's afraid of being confident. It's afraid of, oh my God, what would happen if I really was successful? So it's important to start to implement that, and then we can continue to work with each piece that comes up. And there's really a beautiful storyline that comes with it. The inner self knows, okay, he's ready to stop this negative pattern in his head.
Whatever the issue is, you have been experiencing or engaging in for decades, 10 years, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? So the expectation that one session is going to unravel 40 or 50 years of a habituated pattern of behavior is not realistic. And this is exactly what you're saying. And the other thing is that the first session is really used to get the client acclimated to hypnosis. And then what happens with the subsequent sessions, the second, third, fourth, or fifth session, is because the client has experienced hypnosis before, they go in deeper and quicker in the following sessions, right? I know you've probably experienced the same thing. One of the sayings that we have is that the deeper, the better. The deeper the client is in trance, the more work that can get done because there's less conscious mind interference. Now, you mentioned something else which was very important. Client commitment, right? This is what we're talking about. The client also has to be committed to want to change. They have to invest in themselves. Because if they're coming to you or to me and they're looking for a silver bullet, but they really don't want to change their ways or their lifestyle, they just want us to make something go away, that's not very effective, right?
Right. And it's for good reason, because it's disempowering to them.
Yeah.
Because, when you're doing healing or you're a healer or you're working with healing modalities, you're never actually healing that person. You're helping them heal themselves. So if someone is looking for you to heal them, what they're saying unconsciously is, I can't heal myself, so fix this issue. Now, of course, that can only continue in different forms. So I guess it's set up for their benefit because, it's important that they know that they can heal themselves using whatever modality they wish, and that's change. Change is in your behavior. It's not what you know, it's in your behavior. So if you're looking for a silver bullet, how would that be in your behavior? That's just almost passing it off to someone else. You're not owning it.
Right. Yeah, a question I have for you, and I'll ask this, and then I want to switch a little bit to the spiritual work, because I know that you're very, very good with the spiritual hypnosis. But before we get there, I remember when I first started out that as a hypnotherapist, I wanted to help everybody. I don't want to use the word fix, but I can get everybody's conflicts resolved. If you just came to me and worked with me, I can do this. And it's not because, you're patting yourself on the back. It's because that's what you want to do. You want to help people. That's why you get into this business. If you're not in this business to help people, then you probably shouldn't be in it. That's how I would explain it, right?
Right.
So I quickly found out, and you tell me if you had a very similar experience, that approach where I could help everybody. That wasn't realistic because it goes back to what we were just saying. The commitment has to be on the part of the client. They have to be committed to wanting to make the change. Because you and I can work as hard as we want to work and do the very best we can possibly do. But if the person in the chair is resisting and skeptical about whether they're really ready for the change, then not a whole lot's going to happen for them. Am I right there?
I love this question because I think it's so powerful and vulnerable of you to bring it up, because I really feel that it's a common thread with people who, work in healing, is that
yeah.
I completely agree. And I have also learned this lesson and still learn from time to time. And what I have found is that what helps me is realizing there's always a purpose to everything. There's always an underlying reason. There really are no accidents. So sometimes people will come to you, and part of their journey to heal is to know that they're not ready to heal. When I used to do smoking cessations, I would have people say, I am 100% ready. And then when it came to the session, it was like all this fear came up, and I would even have sessions where people were talking about how much they love cigarettes. And so finally I would just simply ask the question, are you ready to quit smoking? And they would just say, no.
Yeah.
And we get, okay, great. Well, we can do this when you're ready. And it's like, is that okay? It's like, yeah. And so the point to this is that sometimes they actually need to realize that they're not ready, or they need to realize that they're not frustrated enough, or they're not fed up enough, or for some reason that's what they needed. So the truth is, even that is healing. You never know. So being, basically they say to be a master is to know that everyone is their own master. So if someone decides they're not ready to heal, then maybe that's what they need right now, or maybe that's part of their path. But it's so important because it actually, as I'm sure you noticed, that feeling of, I need to heal this person, or I need to fix this person, creates almost a constriction of the energy.
Yes.
And so when you open it up to, I'm just going to be me and provide the space for this person, and it's none of my business what they do with it. It's up to them. All of a sudden the energy starts to flow, and all of a sudden you open up new doors, and you give the option to also be surprised. And it takes the pressure off you, because that's not good as well, to feel responsible for other people's healing in that way, to feel responsible for what you put forth, but you can't take responsibility for what they do with that.
Yeah, everybody is responsible for their own inner work. They have to take responsibility for that. Like you said, Caroline, we can't give that to you. We can't be responsible for the work that you have to do. We can give you an environment in which you can explore how you can help yourself. But again, you have to have that commitment. I have a funny story. Well, I hope it's funny. Talking about smoking cessation. But a few years ago, I had an older gentleman call me up, and he said, hey, do you do smoking cessation? I said, yes, I do. So he says, okay, well, I want to schedule an appointment. And I said, well, why do you want to quit? He says, well, I don't really want to quit. I like smoking. It's my wife. My wife wants me to quit. So I said to him, I said, well, then the probability that the sessions are going to be successful, it's very low odds that you're going to walk out as a non-smoker. He goes, well, why is that? I said, well, it's because you don't want to quit. That's what I hear you saying. He goes, no, I don't want to quit. She wants me to quit. I told him, when you're ready, when you feel like, hey, you've had enough of cigarettes, give me a call back and we'll do the sessions. I said, otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to waste your time and waste your money. The reason why I'm telling this story, folks, is because it's important to tell people the truth. So, yes, you could take them in, and after hearing that they really don't want to quit, and bring them in and take their money. And I don't know, Caroline, maybe I'm just, not too business savvy, if you will. I can't do that. I have to have this, the truth has to be out there first, and to make sure that my client fully understands how this works. because it's not about, for me, it's not about just chasing the money. It's truly about wanting to help people. But in order for me to truly help them, they have to be coming from a perspective of wanting to help themselves first.
No, I love that story. I like your impression. It's very spot on. I could picture him saying that. But I think you're speaking to something that's very truthful. And in fact, I would say you're being more business savvy, because that's not good business to get.
Yeah.
And I've actually found, in terms of abundance or making money, that in the long run, you actually make more.
Yes.
When I have consultations with people over the phone, it's insane how I've gotten to the point where I just say what I do. There is no like trying to convince or anything, because that's also for me too. This is what I'm passionate about. So why would I change who I am? And every now and then, it's very rare, I'll get someone who is looking for a different approach. They're looking for the more authoritative or the silver bullet, or, more clinical or whatever it is. And that's fine. But I'll tell them, this is what I do, blah, blah, blah. And it's so funny. Sometimes it's almost like it works in reverse. So I'll be saying, maybe I'm not the best one. There are many. Maybe I'm not the best one. And they're like, well, wait a minute. Because sometimes there's a part of us that reaches out for something that we're not aware of mentally. So it's like our heart is saying, I want this, and our head is saying, I want something else. Anyway, that's getting off the topic, but I completely agree with you. And I think, we all know this just for common sense. How easy is it to change someone with your will? How many times have you been able to change someone?
Right.
A husband, a wife, a brother, a sister. It's impossible. You can't.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times it just results in arguing and harsh words and resentment and frustration, right? That's imposing will. Like you said, it doesn't work very well. So, Caroline, let's just shift gears a little bit here and talk about the spiritual aspects of hypnosis. Because a lot of people, they will know about hypnosis, the benefits of it, for releasing weight or stop smoking and self-confidence and pain and stuff like that. But there's a whole other piece of this, and that is the spiritual hypnosis. And maybe some folks have heard of it in the form of past life regression or life between lives and stuff like that, even though it's more than that also, right? Because past lives and life between lives, they are specific techniques to get you to a certain destination or a certain place. In the case of a past life, it's to experience a past life. In the case of a life between lives, it's to experience your soul's existence in the spirit world. But it's not just that. Your soul can actually go explore and reach out for answers and wisdom just going into the ether. That's how I kind of explain it. Soul traveling and going where it needs to go to be able to get the information it needs in order to help you to better navigate your life path. So I know you and I have talked before on the phone, and I know how really good you are at this. So when a client calls you, is your approach more geared toward tapping into that spiritual aspect as part of the process to help resolve the conflict? How do you go about doing that?
My approach is always, how does this fit into the bigger picture of this person or this being or this journey that this individual is on? Like, for example, let's say this person working on confidence. I would want to know, why is this significant? Why would you even have this situation? Why would you go through that as a child? What does it have to do with who you are now and what you're passionate about? And then how does that fit into your bigger picture? So like, oh, well, now I'm an actor, and I'm really passionate about getting into those emotional states. And it's really important for me to be confident because I'm an actor. And I like to look behind the curtain and see the bigger picture. So I find that spiritual to me means what's deeper, and what is like the heart of it? What is the juice of it? How does this connect to you as a being? How is this only about you and has nothing to do with anyone else? So I'm always looking for that unique puzzle piece that person is. And so I guess the way I tie it in, it's almost a loaded question because there's so many ways. It could be, sometimes I'll have people connect with actual spirit guides, and do a Q&A, or, sometimes I'll have them connect with future versions of themselves, or sometimes I'll have them just dialogue with the inner self, or sometimes there are past life connections. So to me, the integration is, how does it fit into their present reality? How does having a conversation with their spirit guide apply to this life that they're living right now, this day, this week? Because I always find that there's some sort of theme that's working its way.
What about clients that you get a sense that when they come in, that maybe spirituality or thinking in those terms is really not something that they give a lot of thought to? But then once they're in the session and they're in that deep trance state, that they're actually able to plug in to these higher levels, these higher realms, teachers, guides, or just awareness, just their higher self, right? After the session, when you take a client like that through the process, do they come out of the session saying, wow, that was interesting, or what was that all about? Or maybe it's even a quiet moment or solace where they're very contemplative, right? They come out of the session and they're just trying to process through what it is that they just experienced. So I guess my question is, how does it work for the typical client when they have an experience in hypnosis that is an experience that at any given moment during the day they never gave any thought about, but at that moment in time they're plugged in? What's that like for them when they come out of the session?
It blows their mind, literally, which is a good thing. It changes the trajectory of their life and their identity in a positive way. And like you said, it's very common for some people to, because they feel they're in this kind of timeless state when they come out, sometimes they're in almost like such a different energy or that positive shock that they will be in silence for, sometimes I'll even say, are you with me? And they're like, oh yeah, sorry, I was just thinking.
Yeah. Yep. What is your impression of what it is that they got? What is your impression as the hypnotherapist, as the practitioner, of what it is that they experienced?
Oh, I believe they got what they're ready for. I believe that they connected to a very real part of themselves that previously they weren't ready to entertain for their own reasons, for their own protection or for their own path.
Or didn't even know about, right?
Right. So what they're doing is they're actually, what seems to be having this crazy experience, they're actually remembering a part of themselves. They're opening a door, they're creeping in, they're looking into a part of themselves that they have forgotten or didn't consciously know of. So they're essentially diving deeper into a part of themselves and experiencing another level of themselves that they on some level were ready to experience. And the experience itself can be completely new and uncertain, but the themes and the afterthought or the feeling that comes from it is kind of like a coming home or what I mentioned before about listening to my inner voice. It's all related.
Yeah.
So I think the experience for them might be very shocking and new. Some people have even said that was trippy.
Yeah. Yep.
But they're accessing something very real, and not just real, but real within themselves. So it really opens new doors for them, and it's almost like they are able to enter a different paradigm. So what I mentioned, I want to relate this back to my inner voice story. Back then, going for walks was a big deal for me. Listening to this inner voice, that, even hypnotherapy I thought was pretty wacky. Now, even the word spirituality, it doesn't even faze me anymore because it's such a part of my language. It's who I feel that I am. So I can't even compare myself to who I was then because I'm such a different person. I understand and look at the world differently. So that's what I feel happens with them. And I've had many, many clients who will go on to use that in what they're passionate about, that some even do become intuitives or mediums or psychics, or they use that inner voice that now is stronger, or even sometimes there's a connection that they make that they didn't necessarily make before. So yeah, it's a profound experience. It's almost hard to put words onto it.
Yeah, it's a whole different ball of wax when you start to introduce the transpersonal and then the spiritual tools into a session, because it really opens up the aperture to so many more ways to help resolve the conflict versus staying confined to a typical clinical approach. When you start opening it up to the expanded consciousness, if you will, the sky's the limit as far as what can be brought in to help the client to be on a better path. I mean, that's what I found. Now, let me ask this. This is kind of related, but maybe kind of a weird question for some folks. But I periodically get people that call me or contact me, and they want to know if I can help them to connect with loved ones who have crossed over. And I have done that, and the success rate to do that has been very good, especially when the client is in a very, very deep trance state, like a very deep theta state, to be able to do that. I don't want to sound like, we're sitting there with robes and pointy hats with moons and stars on it, but the truth of the matter is that the ability to be able to have a client make that connection exists. And so my question to you is, have you had similar types of sessions that you've facilitated where you've brought somebody who is alive and well in this world and have gotten them to connect with somebody who's crossed over? In most cases, I have found it's for the purposes of closure. They needed closure because they didn't have it when that person who died was alive. Have you had sessions like that?
Great question. Yeah, I'm not afraid of this stuff at all. In fact, even more common for me is we won't talk about it at all, and it will happen.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes when a person is a little bit, let's say, they've gone through a lot of trauma, or they are a little bit afraid to go deeper within, or, they're not really sure what to expect. But like I said, their heart is wanting to, maybe their head hasn't fully caught on, but there's something in them that is interested. I will find that sometimes there might be a little resistance to dig into things or look into things because of that fear. And that is oftentimes when a loved one will show up to help them and to remind them or to love them and protect them. And it happens all the time. I've had people who are even really surprised. It's like, we weren't even that close, but somehow their guidance is what I need. I've even had sessions where an unborn or a miscarriage individual will come up and they'll be their main guide. They'll be their absolute supporter. And I actually think that this is becoming more and more common because we're evolving as a species to a point where we're realizing that there's more than just us, and we're realizing that energy is about frequency and that nothing really dies, it only changes form.
Right.
So I find that it's a huge important part of the process because those people who are ready to heal in that way usually also have some sort of purpose that they're serving. And whether that's they're a writer, they do artwork, or they're a mom, or whatever it is, somehow their purpose also serves a bigger purpose. And so a lot of times those loved ones are kind of gently guiding them to move forward with that.
A related question. With past lives, clients will sometimes ask, well, even beforehand or maybe even afterwards, are past lives real? Is it really memory recall from a previous life, or is it constructed? And how do you answer that question when you get posed that question?
My framework of past lives, I'm not even sure if it's the same as yours, but I'll just speak on what I know from experience, is that, well, one, of course it's real. And I think actually you have told me this when I was first getting started with past lives. You said, well, you can just ask them, have they ever experienced a past life before? And the answer is no. So of course you wouldn't know what to experience or what it would be like. So how can you say it's not real? The other clue is, well, then where did the emotions come from? And why is the theme very similar to what you're going through now? The way I see past lives now is I see again, it's all about relevance. Why is that person making that connection? I see that there is no actual past. Everything exists now. However, there are future selves and past selves, and it's all happening now. So yes, you're still accessing it, but what you're accessing, whatever you believe, is a kind of identity or a part of yourself that is in that reality and going through either similar struggles and challenges or learning similar lessons. And why are you making that connection? That's where really the key is, when you realize, okay, this is how it connects. So I guess my answer is, why the emotion? Why the connection? How is it relevant for you? And does that serve you to ask, is this real or not real?
And to take in the details of the past life, to experience periods of time that the vast majority of the clients have no understanding of. I mean, they might have some minor understandings based upon watching movies and stuff like that, but not intricate details about what it was like to live in Italy in 1600 and to understand, what the architecture looked like and what how people dressed and so on. I've answered the question this way too. Your answer is perfect, but I also explained to them that let's just say hypothetically that it's not a real memory, but an elaborate metaphor that your mind has created. Isn't that in itself amazing? That your mind for that 2 hour or 2.5 hour period of time was able to create a metaphor which was constructed so that it can help you to resolve conflict, right? Even looking at it from that perspective. And by the way, I believe that the experiences that the clients go through are memories of past lives. I'm saying if somebody is adamant about, I'm not really sure, well, let's take a look at it from this perspective. That in itself, the grand metaphor, is an amazing feat. So either way, I would say it's good because both scenarios, whether it's a real past life or it's an elaborate metaphor, came through so that it can help you to make better decisions and better choices in your life and make you more aware of the things that you need to do in order to walk a better path in life. Anyway, so I wanted to put that out there because I don't get an opportunity actually to have this type of discussion. So that's why I'm glad you and I are talking to kind of bounce things off of each other as well. I know I'm supposed to be doing the interview here, but it's kind of like a discussion between two friends, which it is. What about, Caroline, between lives, where your soul resides in between your incarnations? Do you do a lot of between lives work?
So to answer this question, I would say I think it's very powerful and significant. However, my passion is really helping people make the connections now. So I'm almost so passionate about the bigger picture, the spirit, the life between lives, that I feel that sometimes it's almost like, okay, we don't even need to go there. That we're being aware of that. Great. Now let's go to the next step, which is what piece is important now. So what I mean by that is it will come up in chunks. So for example, okay, let's say this person let's say they're a writer and they are really trying to, move in a different direction with their writing. And they found that in the past, they've been kind of blocking themselves off by going with what's the norm or what they feel will make money. And so now they're finding all this creativity and kind of intuitiveness is trying to come through them. So there may be a situation where they'll make a connection to a soul that they usually incarnate with, or they'll make a connection to a theme that they bring through all their lives. And that will help them understand, oh, this is a challenge I've been through before. And maybe that challenge is, I don't trust myself, or I constantly let society guide me, and through connecting with the spirit realm or connecting with other souls that they've gone through on their journey, they'll be reminded of that fact and it will be kind of a boost for them. So I guess what I'm saying is I use that template 100%. It is totally connected to my sessions. But for me, I almost imagine we're going on a journey, we're getting in on the magic carpet and we're all right, what do we need to discover that's relevant today? And it may be connecting with that life between lives realm. Or it may be just taking like grabbing a book from there and saying, okay, this is what I need to know for now. We'll come back later.
Yep. So I think what you're saying is that it's not necessarily a specific direction for the session. What I mean by that is it's not necessarily, okay, we're going to do a life between lives. I think what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that if the client goes into that space, into the between lives arena, in order to be able to get their answers or the wisdom or the insight, that's where you navigate them to. That's where they go. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. It's almost like I'm very passionate about the digging work and the interactive portion, and life between lives is a little bit more unraveling the story. It's a different type of healing, right? It's like the information itself is healing. I want to get my hands dirty and say, all right, where's this resistance? Let's move and clear it. So all that means is that we don't go through the whole story of a life between lives. We may use a piece or a chunk of information that's important and bring it into the healing work.
What you're saying is if the client winds up at their council of elders having a review, that is then where they go. And you help facilitate and navigate them to that council meeting in order to get the information that they need.
Right.
Right. And so from there, they might go someplace else in the spirit world. And if that's the case, then you help them to navigate to where they need to go to next in order to get some additional information or some additional insight. Do I have that right?
Right. I almost feel like using past life regression would be a simpler way of explaining it. I no longer advertise or give past life regressions. Still agree with them, love them, but I've found that I'm more passionate about, again, getting into the actual interactive healing work. That being said, there's oftentimes people will pop into a past life anyway, or a past life is important for their healing at that time.
Okay, gotcha.
But I won't guide them there unless it's coming up. It's almost like, this sounds kind of funny, but imagine it's like we're having a radio show with spirit and their inner self. And it's like, okay, we're going to connect today. And we walk in and they say, great, here's what's on the docket. You need to clear this, this, and this. And just so you know, this connects to this. And you might want to really take it all the way to this level to understand this for you. So it's really like we're going on a journey that uses all of these aspects. But the reason why is because whether they are aware, whether they have it in their mindset, I have it in my mindset that all of this is real and exists, that all of this is significant, and it's all about relevance.
Fascinating discussion, Caroline. Really it is. It's fascinating. You've done a terrific job at building your practice. And you mentioned earlier that you're in the LA area and you did come from Massachusetts, right? You made the move from the East Coast to the West Coast. I remember when you did that, that was a big change for you and you made it work. So hats off to you for doing the things that you're doing. And the discussion today was fantastic. I know that a lot of folks in the audience really love this type of discussion. Like I said, it's a little break from the conspiracy stuff where we get more into the spirituality and more into the metaphysics of our existence. So now, Caroline, where can people contact you? Where can they reach you?
So the best way to reach me would be my website, www.healingtideshypnotherapy.com. There's a contact form on there. And of course, you could just do info@healingtideshypnotherapy.com to send me an email. But really the best way is to just go to my website, check it out, and use the contact form. Okay,
very good. Well, Caroline, again, I want to thank you so much for accepting my invite to come on. I want to let the audience know that we had no script. We decided that we were just going to talk, and that's what we did. So, and it was a great discussion.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. This was really fun and really great for me. It's fun to talk about this stuff.
Oh, come back anytime. And that concludes another Sage Okoye interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the description box below. And as always, I would like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can find all my social media and web links by visiting my hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to check out my music and album releases. And remember, live in truth, and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone with the next show. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
Sometimes I feel so tired, but today I feel so wired. And I look through my crystal ball. All I see is that wall. So many people are standing still, drifting away. They lost their will. I just want to shake them and give them ears. Wake up, stop living in fear. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. Sometimes I feel so cheated, but today I won't be defeated. I cut the chains and I break free. Open your eyes and you will see. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. We are here to live and learn. Another life, another turn. Don't be afraid to shine. Don't be afraid to open your mind. You are human. You are a beautiful soul. You are one with creation. Come on, get up, let's go. You are a beautiful soul.